Hello, good day, dobrý den. My name is Nadia McConnell. I'm president of the U.S.-Ukraine Foundation, and I'm very pleased to welcome you to this very important discussion about a major step in holding Mr. Putin and the Russian Federation accountable for the various crimes against the people of Ukraine. Several years ago, under the leadership of David Crane, Friends of Ukraine Network created a working group, and three of our panelists today were part of that working group, and they have been educating us about the critical importance of this step about creating the special tribunal. And I want to say something about that in the sense that for those of us who were involved in 1983, on the 50th anniversary of the Holodomor, that was the first major effort to have the world recognize the Holodomor. We had a resolution and then also the creation of the Famine Commission. And the United States was the first government that recognized the Holodomor as a crime of genocide. So it took 50 years to get there. And so I think it's very important that these current crimes are being recognized now, and the efforts are being made to hold those perpetrators accountable. I'm happy to announce also that the work of this working group is being expanded. And under the leadership of Karl Gershman, founding president of the National Endowment of Democracy, and the Honorable Irwin Cotler, the creation of an international group that will continue supporting and focusing and advocating for the Special Tribunal, but with a special focus on certain crimes, such as the abduction of children, the use of sexual violence as a weapon of war, and the ill treatment of prisoners of war, both military and civilian. If you saw the article in The Guardian a few weeks ago, or a week ago, where they basically said that it's going to be basically impossible to get them back. Russia's mass abduction of Ukrainian children is a war crime. And it talked about the various challenges. So while we join everybody who is advocating for the return of children, we are also focusing on prosecuting or holding accountable the implementers of these programs. And so we at the foundation will be releasing in the next several weeks several reports dealing with one of the ways that we can hold people accountable, and that is the use of sanctions. And the first report, which we'll be releasing in a few days, is the one about sanctioning those individuals that are implementing the program of abducting children. The government of Ukraine has sanctioned over 250 people, has identified them as who are engaged and implementing this program. However, it's very uneven as far as the sanctioning by other countries around the world. For instance, in the United States, only 65 individuals have been sanctioned. So there's a lot of work to be done to increase the sanctions against the implementers of these various programs and who are committing war crimes. Without further ado, I will now turn over to Karl Gershman, who will be moderating this panel discussion to discuss this very, very important development, and that is the establishment of the Special Tribunal, which was just announced, I think, a week ago. So, Karl, turn it over to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Nadia. And you're starting by mentioning the 50th anniversary in 1983 of the Holodomor. Reminds me that just last week I told you that on that occasion I was happening to represent the United States in the Third Committee of the UN, and I gave a speech on that, the 50th anniversary of the Holodomor, and the Ukrainian representative in the committee denied that it ever happened. So we got a long way to go.
Yes.
Well, this is a very important discussion, as Nadia said, and I'm very happy to welcome everyone to it. And it was just 3 weeks ago that the Council of Europe, and the Ukrainian government officially signed the accord to establish the special tribunal addressing the crime of aggression against Ukraine. And it was on just Tuesday of this week, 2 days ago, that the Ukrainian parliament ratified that agreement. So we're now at the beginning of what's going to be a very complex and uncertain process with a long way to go. And it's possible, and certainly it's our great hope, that if pursued with courage and determination, the tribunal has the potential to become a critical step, not just toward accountability and justice for the victims of aggression against Ukraine, but also for deterring other potential acts of aggression that threaten so many countries in our troubled world. We'll be hearing today from 5 outstanding international legal specialists, all of whom have been involved in one way or another in conceiving, debating, and formulating the comprehensive statute for the tribunal that aims to ensure the independence and impartiality of the tribunal in addressing the grave violations of international law that have been committed against Ukraine. I want to begin by asking David Crane, the founding chief prosecutor of the Special Court of Sierra Leone, among many other things, to justify the title that he gave for today's seminar, The Trial of the Century, that some people have said, it's a bit overstated. David, explain to us why it's not overstated and why it is, in fact, what you said it was, the trial of the century.
Well, thank you, Carl and colleagues. It's so good to see you again, and my compliments to the foundation in setting this very important webinar up. And I think it's a fair criticism about calling it the trial of the century. I did it not so much as that it really is the trial of the century. What it is the cornerstone for the crime of aggression being used as a tool by which we can deter heads of state who seek to invade their neighbors, henchmen, dictators, putting them on notice that if you commit the crime of aggression, that you will be held accountable. And so this is why the Special Tribunal on the crime of aggression against Ukraine is that cornerstone. Again, this is groundbreaking work led by our friend Anton Korynevych and others who have put together a package, not a perfect package, but a package by which we can now firmly place the flag of justice when it relates to the crime of aggression, which is in some ways a new old crime. It's been around since Nuremberg, and it has been kicked back and forth almost like a soccer ball. But the actual prosecution of the modern concept of aggression, this is a first. And so that's why I humbly call it the trial of the century, because it will set the tone related to future dictators and thugs thinking about attacking their neighbors. It'll deter them. So that's why I call it the trial of the century.
But can you have an epical tribunal if the main perpetrators, the main criminals, are not there? They're in absentia.
Hey, no problem. We can move forward. Creating, and 3 of us in here have created tribunals before. The point is that these are creatures of political compromise. And having been involved in several of them with Hans and Irwin, no one is completely happy with the result. And there's been some political compromises, but the alternative is nothing. And so that can't happen. And so the political victory up to this point will be an indictment of Vladimir Putin for the crime of aggression. But again, it is one of those things where it is not perfect. But there are all kinds of tools within the statute that a good, experienced chief prosecutor can use to shape and mold where his eventual prosecution perhaps can happen. But again, he's not walking away from this by any means at all. So even though people aren't happy that the tribunal can actually prosecute him now, the bottom line is it could happen in the future or in absentia. And certainly an experienced chief prosecutor will name and shame him. Every time they prosecute somebody that is lower ranking, his name is going to come up. He's going to be named and shamed at a minimum as an unindicted co-conspirator, a tool that I used to use when I was in West Africa. It's very significant when we went after Muammar Gaddafi and Blaise Compaoré, president of Burkina Faso. So there's all kinds of tools within the statute that, even though not perfect, certainly can be used to start seeking justice for the people of Ukraine by really boxing in Vladimir Putin and his troika.
I want to discuss some of these compromises with Anton Korynevych right now. Anton, you're the ambassador at large in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. In which capacity you, as I understand, you really spearheaded Ukraine's efforts to establish the Special Tribunal. And you've called the head of state immunity, you did it in your terrific interview with Paul Williams, the elephant in the room, the elephant in the room. And I'd like you, it's really more than the head of state, because it's the troika. It's also the Minister of Defense and the Minister of Foreign Affairs. As long as they're in office, they're exempt from punishment. But I'd like you to explain, as you did before, but also to us today, why this compromise, which, as I understand it, was necessary in order to get the agreement of the G7 for the support for the tribunal, why it doesn't really compromise the efforts to seek true justice and accountability against the perpetrators of this terrible crime of aggression in Ukraine.
Good evening from Kyiv, and thank you all. And first of all, of course, the foundation for this important event. It's a pleasure and honor to be here today with you. I think that David has very elegantly, as always, framed the effort and the outcome of the effort. Well, we all want something perfect and something ideal. And I think that we all who work with international law are idealists, and this is really good because we believe in good things. We believe in principles, we believe in values. But there happens to be the times and the situations where you need to come to an agreement and where you need to have a compromise, when you need to have a result, an outcome, a deliverable, with which I call it a formula everybody will be able to live with. So not to be happy or not to be very, excited, but to be able to live with. And of course, I think everybody here on this event understand that to establish the first tribunal with a subject matter jurisdiction on the crime of aggression in 80 years, I mean, it was a real hard task. And it was a task which when we worked on this matter, because we were present and we moderated all the 14 in-person core group meetings and a lot of online efforts for this, we were not sure about the result. So the result was not certified and everything could have happened. So we tried to get the package with which everybody will be able to live with and which would ensure that we will be able to establish a tribunal which will be able to do its job. So I think that the outcome and deliverable is even better than somebody could have imagined. Understanding that the crime of aggression for a lot of years for some of the states is still enfant terrible of international criminal law. And I think the recent special session of the Assembly of States of the state parties of the Rome Statute in New York on Kampala II amendments, I think shows that there is not now the momentum, unfortunately, to push forward the amendments to the jurisdiction of the International Criminal Court, because I think of this very sensitive nature of the crime of aggression. But we really think that what we achieved on our matter is a very good deliverable and outcome. So first of all, there are no immunities in relation to Troika in the statute of the Special Tribunal. So you will not find any kind of wording on that. And it was very important for us because, yes, this is the obvious elephant in the room. What we did, we tried to frame this check and balances between investigation and prosecution in relation to current Troika. And in relation to current Troika, we found this procedural solution. So there is nothing in the statute on material law in relation to Troika, but there is only a procedural provision in procedural part of the statute which says that the indictment is being called up by the prosecutor, and then the tribunal for the time being, for only a specific time while the Troika members are in the office, suspends the proceedings. But then the proceedings renew when the Troika members leave the office. And I think this provision we need to analyze in conjunction together with the provision which Carl and David, you named already, the ability of the tribunal to have full trials in absentia. And I think that it's important for our international friends and colleagues to understand that trials in absentia are very important for Ukrainians, for us. So we can have not only arrest warrants, but we can have full verdicts, full judgments in relation to number 4 and down already. So we can say Russian Minister of Defense is not just alleged criminal because of arrest warrant, but he is a criminal because he has a judgment. Russian Chief of FSB, Russian Chief of Ministry of Interior, and so on and so forth. So I think that if we look at this case in check and balances system, I think that this is an effective tool. And again, Troika is not immune. The only issue is a temporary suspension, and the proceedings would renew. So I think that what we achieved really looks good, and I'm happy to continue with this discussion. Thank you.
Yeah, temporary suspension of exactly what? Temporary suspension of exactly what?
Of proceedings after the indictment is being presented.
After the indictment. So you won't sentence
Yes.
them? Is that the idea? You won't sentence them?
So for the Troika members, the prosecutor officially sends the indictment, and this is made public, to the tribunal's judges. And the tribunal judges make a decision to suspend the proceedings in relation to Troika members for the time being that they are in the office. But when they leave the office, the proceedings are automatically renewed. And this is only in relation to three persons. Yes, head of state, head of government, and Minister for Foreign Affairs. In relation to others, full trials in absentia are possible. And this is, I believe, is a very important matter.
You know, you say when they leave office. I mean, we have no expectation, unless Ukraine achieves a complete military victory, that Putin is going to be leaving office anytime soon. And as a matter of fact, a friend of ours, Vladimir Kara-Murza, the Russian writer and dissident, who was there at the signing ceremony on June 25th, wrote a column about this in which he said, why should Putin have head of state immunity when he's not a legitimately elected head of state? He's a usurper, as two resolutions of the Council of Europe charged, because his election in 2024, his re-election to a third consecutive term, really was unconstitutional, since it violated the Russian constitution, which limited the president to 2 consecutive terms. And therefore, he should not. I mean, I think I know the answer to this. It's basically saying that he's not a legitimate head of state. Why should he have immunity? Actually, you know, it was almost really 5, the 5th consecutive term, since, you know, if you don't count the interlude by Medvedev almost 2 decades ago, which was, he's sort of Putin's flunky, so it's not a legitimate interruption of Putin's 5 consecutive terms. But why is he a legitimate head of state deserving? I'm asking this question because I think Vladimir would want me to put it to you. Why is he a legitimate head of state if he was now serving in his third, but in some ways his fifth consecutive term?
Well, thank you for the question, Carl. Well, first of all, I would reiterate that there are no provisions on any kind of immunities for the heads of state in the statute. And this is very important. There is only this provision on temporary suspension. And of course, we all are free to interpret it in the way each of us want to do this. In relation to the stated question, I think that the judges of the tribunal will decide. So whether somebody can be named and framed as a head of state or not. We Ukrainians, we always wanted to have the independent tribunal, which will be able to do its job and to pronounce its own judgments in the name of the tribunal as a subject of international law, as a tribunal which has the international legal capacity, international legal representation. So we do not want to have impact on that decisions, but I think that, and it relates maybe not only to this person, but maybe to some other person who calls also himself a president in another state who committed the act of aggression against Ukraine, just a bit northern from our northern regions, Belarus. Yes, so I think tribunal judges will deal with these questions, in particular with the questions of legitimacy of being called a head of state.
And if you were trying to justify the tribunal to Ukrainians who are skeptical because of what they see as this immunity, what would you say to them?
I would say that this tribunal does not grant immunity to anybody. Any kind of suspensions are just procedural matters. The tribunal can bring accountability for the crime of aggression against Ukraine. It can, it really can. This is the only instrument which can do this. So not being an ideal solution, and I'm sure that there can be no ideal solutions in this particular sphere nowadays in the world, we all see what happens with international criminal law in particular. I believe that this solution serves its purpose.
Okay, good. I want to move on to Hans Corell, who we're very proud to have you on the panel today. Hans Corell is the former Undersecretary General for Legal Affairs of the United Nations, who, among a myriad of other responsibilities, served with David Crane and Irwin Cotler on the Friends of the Ukraine Network Working Group on Accountability for Russian War Crimes, and he was also a judge in Sweden. So, Judge Corell, when you were legal counsel of the UN, you helped create a host of international legal institutions involving, the International Criminal Court Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia, the International Criminal Court, the Special Court for Sierra Leone, the Extraordinary Chambers for Cambodia to try the Khmer Rouge for its genocide in the late 1970s. How is this new special tribunal different? I think you've used the word unique. How is it different, and what are its does it have any special strengths or weaknesses in relationship to these other international legal bodies that you have been involved in bringing into existence?
Thank you very much for your introduction. And I was deeply involved, as you indicated, in the creation of all these courts when I was the Undersecretary for Legal Affairs of the United Nations between 1994 and 2004 for 10 years, 3 years at Boutros Ghali and 7 years at Kofi Annan. And I really had hoped that we could have now created a court based on the model of the Special Court for Sierra Leone, because I negotiated the agreement within the UN and Sierra Leone to establish this court, and that David Crane was the first chief prosecutor. And before that court, a head of state was prosecuted, and he is now serving a long sentence imprisonment. This is why I hoped that we could have had a court according to this model. But the so-called core group established by the United Nations General Assembly, they were not able to agree on this. And this is why we now have this situation where Ukraine had to turn to the Council of Europe and have this special court created. But it's important to emphasize the legal background here. The United Nations was created after two world wars in the 40s. And there we have a Security Council. And this council has the primary responsibility for the maintenance of international peace and security. And in Ukraine, we now have one of these permanent members of the court violating flagrantly one of the most fundamental rules in the UN Charter, namely Article 2, Paragraph 4. And I will quote this paragraph for you here. All members of the United Nations shall refrain in their international relations from the threat or use of force against the territorial integrity or political independence of any state or in any other manner inconsistent with purposes of the United Nations. Now we have a permanent member of the UN Security Council flagrantly violating this rule. And this is why it is so important that we have a court that can adjudicate the crime of aggression, because the ICC, the International Criminal Court, does not have jurisdiction of this crime in this particular case. And this is why I think it's so important that it was best possible to have this agreement between the Council of Europe and Ukraine to establish this court. And I really do hope that the court will function effectively. And Anton, he explained the situation with respect to the immunity, because before this special court for Sierra Leone, there was no immunity for a head of state. But in this other case, there is immunity, at least in the first stage. But it is for the court to decide then if there is an indictment, because the indictment is an important element, because there the prosecutor will make public what the suspicions against the person who committed the crime is, or the persons. And this is why it's so important that indictment is there. Now, when the court has looked at this, if the persons are still in office, there is immunity. But as was explained here by Anton, this means that when they leave office, then the immunity will disappear. And also there can be trials in absentia. And if there is a trial in absentia, the moment the suspect is apprehended, then the court can hold a new trial where the accused person is present. So I think that these are very important elements when we look at the special court now created for Ukraine.
What do you think the implications are if this permanent member of the UN Security Council, Russia, is indicted by this special tribunal? What does it mean?
Well, I mean, I think it's a very important signal to the whole world that it is not acceptable in modern world today that heads of state engage in this kind of flagrant violation of the UN Charter. And we should be sure to honor the heritage that we inherited from a generation that had experienced two world wars when they created the United Nations. And we should be careful to respect the Charter. And this is not being done here by Russia. It's very, very sad.
And does, in a way, does it undermine, in your view, I mean, the influence, the legitimacy of the Security Council if a permanent member of the Security Council is indicted for committing aggression by an international court?
Yes. I mean, this is extremely important. And I mean, I've seen the results of all the courts where I was deeply involved in the establishment of these courts, how important they have been. And this is why it's so important in this case that the court established here is working efficiently, and there is an indictment that is published, and then people can see what the suspects are. As you know, There are already indictments for other crimes, the abduction of children from Ukraine, and this has been done by the International Criminal Court in The Hague. But as I said, this court does not have jurisdiction over the crime of aggression in this particular case. And this also raises another question that I think is absolutely necessary to amend the Rome Statute. I was Kofi Annan's personal representative when they negotiated the Rome Statute in 1998, but they were not able then to formulate the crime of aggression. This was done then in 2010 in a meeting in Africa. But this amendment is not sufficient in my view, and this is why the member states of the statute of the Rome Statute, they simply have to reformulate the shall we say, the rule of the crime of aggression in the statute so that it can be dealt with in the same way as the court is dealing with the other crimes according to the Rome Statute, crimes against humanity, war crimes, and genocide. It's very important that aggression is dealt with in the same manner in the Rome Statute.
In terms of making aggression a crime that can be adjudicated by the ICC.
Yes, it's very important.
Is it being negotiated right now?
I know that states are discussing this, but the latest report I received is that they are probably not completely in agreement on how to proceed here. But I think it's so important that this is done because, as I said, I was very disappointed when I saw the amendments to the Rome Statute in 2010, because I had hoped that when we were not able to do this properly in Rome in 1998, they should be able to do this when they negotiated this again in 2010. This was not sufficient. This is why it's necessary to revert to this issue, and it has to be reformulated, the crime of aggression in the Rome Statute.
Right, but in the absence of that, I take it that this special tribunal establishes a model for how the international community can deal with the crime of aggression.
Absolutely, it does. But my hope is that when this court has, shall we say, performed as it hopefully will, that the states have been able to amend the Rome Statute so that it shouldn't be necessary to establish special courts in the future, but the Rome Statute should deal with this in the future. Thank you.
Do you think the way the special tribunal performs will influence the debate over the Rome Statute, amending the Rome Statute?
I hope so, and I think it will.
Okay. All right, I want to move on to Ina Liniova, who is the director of the Institute for Human Rights of the Ukrainian Bar Association and was previously the UBA's executive director. And Ina has been involved since the very beginning in the development discussion of the creation of this special tribunal. And I wonder, Ina, if you could explain to us what were some of the expectations when the idea of this special tribunal was conceived, and how has the process changed in the last 3 years? And related to that, I mean, can you tell us how the tribunal is being perceived today in Ukraine? And obviously, this question we've been discussing, the elephant in the room. How do you see the views in Ukraine over this issue of so-called head of state immunity, which, as Anton has explained, is really more procedural than it is substantive?
Thank you, Carl, for this question, and thank you to the Foundation for the invitation to this event and for having discussions about the tribunal and raising more awareness among the American and international community about this important initiative. I would put it this way. I agree with Ambassador Korynevych in that the Ukrainian society saw a tribunal from the very first days of the war, when the first discussions began about the necessity of establishment of the special tribunal. We saw the tribunal as a purely independent international institution that is similar to in its stature to the International Criminal Court, established or endorsed by the United Nations, and having full authority and mandate to review the crime of aggression and lift immunities of sitting heads of state and troikas in general. That was our position as well. We showed it in our public statements and discussions. Over time, though, we saw, I would say, two trends. One trend was as evolution of this discussion continued. We saw that on the one hand, there is a certain resistance from certain countries. And it's not even a secret. I think we discussed it in previous events, and the information is out there. In particular, G7 countries were a little bit more resistant to such a mandate because some of these countries also have history of being involved in another capacity, though, but nevertheless being involved in international armed conflicts. And we understand that there was some reluctance to endorse a fully fledged international tribunal that could give a precedent for the future. So we were not part of the core group, not part of the formal negotiation. However, we and other civil society organization accepted the fact that we need to accept the compromise, and because the UN lacked unanimous position about the establishment of the tribunal, the Council of Europe did seem to be the only realistic option, and it was a good and legitimate option, since the Russian Federation was a member of the Council of Europe when they commenced the aggression in 2014, and then in 2022 when the fully fledged aggression began. So we understand that it's a compromise. We don't live in an ideal world. We've got to work with what we've got. So we believe that it's a good victory. The tribunal in its current shape and form, it's a good achievement for Ukraine. It's a victory. And although it cannot try Vladimir Putin right now, we believe that it can damage his reputation, damage Russians, the view of Russia in the world, and their capacity to conduct business as usual with other countries. So this is the position of the majority of the civil society and professional community in Ukraine. The second trend, though, that I also wanted to mention is that we see that there is more political will to prosecute Russia and other perpetrators for their participation in the crime of aggression on the behalf of international community. If in the first days of the war, the mere idea about the tribunal sounded impossible, and we heard many times that it's unlikely that something like this will be established and Russia could be tried. Now we see that many things are possible, including the arrest warrants by the International Criminal Court. So we understand that although justice mechanisms are imperfect, however, we are moving in the direction of full accountability. While using the opportunity, I also would like to mention that the European Court of Human Rights also did something no one expects, or at least in 2014, where if you asked Ministry of Justice or any international lawyer about the ECHR mandate and possible position on the interstate dispute between Ukraine and Russia, we would not believe that the ICC in 2025 was able to deliver the famous judgment delivered on July 9th of this year, where the ICC found that the Russian Federation is guilty of committing a number of violations of the European Court of Human Rights. However, the CHR also came to the conclusion and clearly mentioned this in its judgment, that the Russian Federation planned, that it was a deliberate policy and there was planning and preparation to invade Ukraine, and the intent of the Russian Federation to destroy Ukraine as an independent state. which is a de facto ECHR saying that there's evidence, and we believe that the Russian Federation is guilty of the crime of aggression, and this was a deliberate policy of the Kremlin. So we hope that these conclusions will be also used by the tribunal for the crime of aggression as an additional justification for its future conclusions. So we're looking forward to the establishment of the tribunal in flesh and bone, and we hope that it will be done as quickly as possible, because we don't have a lot of time, and time is of essence here, and we hope that the tribunal will at least be able to go after those perpetrators who are within its mandate as of now.
Right. Okay. So in effect, you really see two victories. I mean, the creation of the tribunal is a victory. And then you have the political will of the international community has increased in terms of charging aggression against the perpetrator of that crime. So that's
Yes, exactly.
a very hopeful view. Well, you talk about the flesh and bone. We got to move to flesh and bone, and I really want to have Irwin say a couple of words about that. But before you do, Irwin, I think everybody knows Irwin, the former Justice Minister and Attorney General of Canada, and in my humble view, the most eloquent and resonant voice for human rights in the world today. I really do believe that. There's not a tremendous amount of competition these days, Irwin. I have to confess, but still, you are. And any event, I want you to hear your own views on why this tribunal is so important. I know you believe it deeply. And President Zelensky at the signing ceremony on June 25th said that it will take strong political and legal cooperation to make sure that every Russian war criminal faces justice, including Putin. And he got tremendous applause when that happened. I want you to talk about why that's so important, and then I'm going to get on to the issue which I want you to start a discussion on and transition us into it, of the flesh and bones of the tribunal, the challenges ahead. But first, speak about why this is so important.
Well, first I want to thank Nadia for convening the group here, and all those who've spoken before me made exemplary interventions and have been there in the trenches from the beginning. Let me just say that I've always said about the whole question of a special tribunal that it will be dealing with what is the supreme international crime, the crime of aggression, characterized as the crime of crimes, the mother of all crimes, that makes all the other crimes possible. When Nadia spoke, about deportation of Ukrainian children or on sexual violence, we have to understand that these war crimes and crimes against humanity were all made possible by the crime of aggression to begin with. So that's the first important thing. It is the mother of all crimes, and therefore it's foundational to the pursuit of justice and accountability. The second thing which has to be appreciated has been the impunity that those engaged in the crime of aggression have enjoyed, an impunity which has only both further incentivized their crimes of aggression and further incentivized their war crimes and crimes against humanity. We sometimes forget that, and here Putin and Putin's Russia is a case study. We sometimes forget that the 21st century began with Putin's invasion of Chechnya. It continued on afterwards with Georgia, and then the seizure of the Crimea. And all this done amidst an ongoing culture of impunity. Each act, each war crime incentivizing the next, each act of aggression continuing to incentivize further aggression. So not surprising if you were Putin to say, well, if I went into Chechnya and then I went into Georgia and then I see the Crimea and no one did anything about it, why should anyone care if I go into Ukraine? which is not an independent country, and the Ukrainians are not an independent people. Well, this is where the miscalculation came. And the miscalculation came because of the bravery and the courage of the Ukrainian people. That has to be pointed out. And Zelensky and others stood up in the immediate aftermath of the February 22nd crime of aggression. That's how we got to the process of bringing about a tribunal, because of the bravery and courage of the Ukrainian people, not only affirming their independence and territorial integrity, not only affirming their peoplehood, not only underlining, if you will, the importance at the 80th anniversary of the UN Charter of Hans Corell mentioning Article 2.4 and like, but as I say, the courage and resilience here. And at this point, the bringing of Putin and in its leadership crime, leaders to justice, this will help to combat the culture of impunity. It will help to not only secure accountability, but justice for the Ukrainian victims. And I think that less important, because we, as David Crane has often said, and living in the age of the strongman, it's important to deter the other strongman, so that the culture of impunity that attended Putin's aggression will not incentivize others in what is an ongoing axis of aggression as between Russia, China, and Iran. And so, therefore, the pursuit of justice here, of both accountability for the act of aggression and the accompanying war crimes and crimes against humanity which flowed from it, not only accountability for those acts, but in fact securing justice for the victims and recognizing here the importance of Ukraine's role in helping to bring about this tribunal. So I see this as crucial, in terms of also combating the axis of aggression and those who, not only the axis of aggression, but who are involved in aiding and abetting this crime of aggression. So it isn't only Putin, but those who are aiding and abetting him who can also be brought to justice. So we have an overall combating of the culture of impunity, an overall framework for deterrence, an overall framework for accountability, and on the occasion of the 80th anniversary of the UN Charter, a foundational in this initiative for both the pursuit of justice and accountability.
Well, that's terrific, Irwin, and I really want to thank you for emphasizing the role of Ukraine in resisting the Russian aggression, because this wouldn't be possible. What we're talking about today, this tribunal really wouldn't have been possible if what everyone expected would happen, that they would walk over Ukraine in 3 days, happened. That you don't get a process which ultimately leads to a special tribunal that could mobilize international sentiment against this culture of impunity, as you say. And that's so terribly important. It's like a bookend. The Ukraine's resistance is one end of one bookend, but the other one now is to try to oppose and defeat this culture of impunity, as you've talked about. And that, I mean, what the Ukrainian people, with their courage and determination, are doing is just serving the interests of the entire world. Irwin, you've talked a lot about the challenges ahead for this tribunal. 15 judges have to be appointed, a management committee has to be appointed, all sorts of agreements have to be reached with states. Why don't you lay it out? I'd like Anton also to speak about this, and others if you want to jump in, because you're all on top of this. What are the challenges ahead to make this tribunal work and be successful?
Well, you started to outline them, Carl. And I want to begin with the importance of the special prosecutor. I think that whoever is appointed special prosecutor, and my own support is for David Crane to do this. He's not only done it before, but he's done it successfully He's done it with regard to the Special Tribunal for Sierra Leone, and so he can hit the ground running. But the important point here is that the Special Prosecutor will set the framework for the indictment. And, the indictment itself is a standalone and compelling objective. Because even if the actual prosecution is suspended, the indictment itself has important foundational and juridical value and reputational damage. And so we need somebody who will be able to properly and effectively draw up the indictment. And it's a whole network of professional skills, a repository of experience and expertise, interpersonal skills and the like. I served as a special prosecutor with regard to Canada and the like. I know that the crucial role of the special prosecutor. And then you mentioned the tribunal. We have to make sure that the tribunal is representative. One of the challenges we have is because the agreement was brought about between the Council of Europe and Ukraine, it runs the risk for those who might want to undermine it of it being characterized as a Eurocentric body. And so it's important, therefore, in terms of the managerial committee that is being set up, that it be as inclusive and representative as possible, similarly with regard to the judiciary, so that we don't get those in the BRICS group and those from the global south who will try to undermine it by calling it a Eurocentric framework. And so I think the more representative and inclusive it can be, both with respect to the managerial committee and with respect to the tribunal, is another important dimension. Also, the importance of having a claims commission and a repository for that, because we have to bear in mind always, the rights of the victims and the compensatory framework in that regard, and of course frameworks with regard to rights of defense, so that again this tribunal has with it all the necessary attributes of justice, so that it will not inadvertently invite those who may seek to undermine it. And another elephant in the room is, I have to say this, is because President Trump has not only upended the transnational alliance, but the rules-based international order. Thus far, he's stayed out of it, which is perhaps the best news, and allowed the core group and Ukraine to move forward. And again, I want to highlight the importance of Ukraine in the work of the core group, the important work of Anton Korynevych in Ukraine and the core group, because just as it was Ukraine's courage that stood up to Russian aggression, it was Ukraine's engagement and expertise that continuously mobilized the work of the core group, whether it be at the conferences in Riga and Vienna and Brussels. So Ukraine is crucial here to the overall enterprise. And of course, the investigative capacity, and here the complementarity principle is important. Yes, the ICC does not have jurisdiction over the crime of aggression, and I agree with everything that Hans Corell said with regard to what needs to be done with the Rome Statute. But at The Hague, we do have an international center for the investigation of the crime of aggression, and that has been involved in the mobilization of evidence. So the evidentiary capacity is important. The investigative capacity is important. And here we can have a complementary role with regard to the ICC working together with the Special Tribunal. So all these are the frameworks of what needs to be advanced. But I suspect that given the effective beginning of the core group together with the Council of Europe, and in particular Ukraine, we'll be able to broaden and bring about the representational and inclusive character that is needed for both the prosecution, the judging, the investigation, the compensation, and the like.
And you didn't specifically mention it, but presumably the management committee is going to appoint the 15 judges?
Well, I'd like to, and this,
I want to hear
yeah,
Anton talk about that, maybe.
exactly.
Yeah. Anton, why don't you sort of follow on what Irwin has said on all of these questions? Not only how do you build, I know Ukraine was the inspiration behind this tribunal, but you do not want this to be a Ukrainian court. It has to be an international court. How do you build international support? To me, that's one of the biggest challenges. How do you then execute the idea of complementarity, where, you know, the court is going to, as Irwin just said, is going to rely so heavily upon what exists in The Hague in terms of the ability to investigate, to share information. How is this going to work? Maybe you could let us know what your vision is for a kind of this becoming a kind of a truly international tribunal.
Yeah, thank you so much for the question. Well, I think first of all, the format which we invented, the core group, which really was a very informal, very, friendly surrounding, a very trustful surrounding, because we worked with a closed door. So Chatham House rules applied. I think that those really made a spirit of cooperation, and we all united with value and principle, being some of us divided in how to reach the goal, but being united in values and principles. I think that it really helped us to move forward. And of course, advocacy, because as Ms. Liniova mentioned, we really made a lot of things, starting from the point of view that this is impossible, to the question that, okay, so the tribunal should be there, so what's the best way to do this? So not if, but how. So I think that all these, and of course the deep wish of Ukrainian nation to see justice and accountability was really our engine and in this matter. But I want maybe to talk a bit about the further challenges about which Irwin spoke. And yes, it will be for the management committee to select judges and the prosecutor. But I think that now we need to look technically on the way how the tribunal will really come in flesh and bone. So the first element for this was a signing ceremony on the 25th of June in Strasbourg. The second element now was the Ukraine's ratification of the agreement, which is now in force on this very day. And the third element will be the adoption by the Committee of Ministers of the Council of Europe of the so-called Enlarged Partial Agreement, EPA. This is a very Council of Europe animal. So it's a unique document, a unique instrument from the Council of Europe. And by this Enlarged Partial Agreement, the Management Committee will be established. The Management Committee, which will be something like a smaller assembly of states parties, and the Management Committee will decide on everything which relates to administering and financing the life of the tribunal, like the functioning, the financing, the selection of judges, of the prosecutor, so on and so forth. And whenever the tribunal is established by the bilateral agreement between Ukraine and the Council of Europe, the Enlarged Partial Agreement will be open to any state from any region of the world. So it is now, and now all eyes are on the Enlarged Partial Agreement to adopt it as soon as possible in Strasbourg, and for the states to join it as soon as possible, because with this we will be able to start to build the building of the Special Tribunal, hopefully in The Hague. So now the main challenge is, and the main task, I would say, it's not only the challenge, this is the assignment, a task, to move as quickly as possible with EPA. And I think that with advocating this matter, this point, any kind of support would be important for us. Thank you.
So the enlarged partial agreement involves the creation of the management committee?
Exactly. So the enlarged partial agreement is called on the establishment of the management committee
And
of the
who
Special
chooses the management committee? Who chooses, and how can you internationalize the are you actively recruiting states?
So the management, of course, so the management committee is something like the intergovernmental organization. So the management committee consists of members and associate members who are states, governments. So governments join the enlarged partial agreement, and then they have representatives in the management committee. And the
Is anybody actively recruiting non-European countries to be members?
We are now working on any country, both European and non-European, to become the member of the enlarged partial agreement. In particular, the states, some of the states who you represent now, not all the states. But it's important for us that in the EPA, in the enlarged partial agreement, we have both European and non-European nations. You know that we had non-European nations in the core group. So we hope that they will also join the enlarged partial agreement. So I would kindly request humbly that all our eyes, for those of us who support the special tribunal, should be now focused on the matter of the enlarged partial agreement and as many states joining it and supporting it as possible.
So what is the process? Is this the Council of Europe that is creating this enlarged partial agreement and the management committee? What is Ukraine's role in that? Who are your allies? Because this is a very, very large and important task to create because that's the basic decision-making body. Who is working on this, and who is anyone, who are your allies?
So the text of the enlarged partial agreement is already ready. So we worked with it within the core group. So it's there, it's done. Now it's totally a political question. It's not a legal question anymore. So the following steps are: the states who are ready to join the enlarged partial agreement should inform the Council of Europe that they are ready to be party, to be member of the enlarged partial agreement and the management committee. And when the Council of Europe gets this information, notifications from states, the Council of Europe will put the question of adoption of the enlarged partial agreement to the meeting, to the agenda of the meeting of the Committee of Ministers of the Council of Europe. And then the Committee of Ministers of the Council of Europe, as the highest decision-making body of the Council of Europe, needs to adopt this enlarged partial agreement by 2/3 majority. It is 33 votes out of 46 member states of the Council of Europe. And then after the after the Committee of Ministers of the Council of Europe adopts the enlarged partial agreement, the states ratify it, and it becomes like authoritative for them. They become bound by it. So notification of the Council of Europe, then adoption of the agreement, enlarged partial agreement, by the Committee of Ministers, and then ratification by the states. So this is now the way which we need to follow.
And when will the membership of the management committee be determined in the adoption of this of the enlarged partial agreement? When is the membership, the composition of the management committee, and how is it determined?
So actually, legally, the composition of the management committee is, well, it consists of states. So states who join the enlarged partial agreement are members of the management committee. So they first should ratify the enlarged partial agreement, and then the states make their sovereign decision who should be the person who will be representing state in the enlarged partial agreement. The sooner we will make all these moves and all these steps throughout the EPA, the sooner we will have the concrete personalities working on behalf of states in the management committee.
So you have individuals who represent states. Who chooses? I mean, you don't have a state representative. You have an individual that represents a state. I wasn't quite sure I understood that.
No,
You
no, no.
have-
Look, so the membership is for the state, as in the Assembly of States Parties of the ICC.
Right.
But the state decides who will be representing states. Maybe it will be, I don't know, Miss Inna Liniova, or maybe it will be Anton Korynevych, or
Okay.
maybe it will
So
be
the state,
Irina Mudra.
the state appoints
So it will
somebody.
be the state of Ukraine who will appoint a concrete person who will represent a state in the management
Right.
committee. But every vote will be counting as vote of a state.
Do you have any idea how many states have applied to be members of the management committee?
Has not yet been started because now everybody waited for the ratification of the
Okay.
bilateral agreement between Ukraine and the Council of Europe. Now that the ratification is done and it's effective, we are now actually working with our partners states to see who are there with us in this enlarged partial agreement story. We hope that all the states who supported us in the core group will be part of the enlarged partial agreement. So around 40 states, I think this should be the starting number for the EPA, hopefully.
You know, in that interview that you gave to Paul Williams of the Public International Law Group, you said that there is an unusual amount of political public support internationally for this special tribunal. This is not like it was 25 years ago with the tribunal for former Yugoslavia, because so many countries are worried about aggression and how to deter aggression. And obviously, it's not just in Europe that they're worried about aggression, because there are Asian countries, and we know, like Taiwan or certainly Japan and South Korea, that are very worried about aggression. Are you seeing that kind of response coming internationally from countries that see this as an opportunity to restabilize the international order? Because I think a lot of people feel that the Russian aggression against Ukraine, and frankly, what's happened in the United States, has created a kind of a new instability in the international order, and that the international order itself is threatened, and that this is one way to try to restore stability to the international order. Do you agree with that?
Well, I think and I hope that this unity in relation to the issue of ensuring accountability for the crime of aggression against Ukraine will stay and will only strengthen as we move forward with this issue of enlarged partial agreement. So I hope that all that unity which we had in the core group will remain in place. I think that it is really a very important moment for the crime of aggression. I mean, in the world, because this is a moment where actually the question is there in the air whether the aggression is really illegal, and whether the principles of international law, such as non-use of force or non-threat of force, is still there, whether they are still there. So I think that with this said, I think a lot of our partners, states, governments, even those of them who do not historically support the concept of the crime of aggression, I think they understand that it should be tackled now, here, in this very case. And I hope that with these actions, as our colleagues and Ambassador Corell in particular mentioned, we will be able soon to have the reform of the ICC jurisdiction over the crime of aggression. Unfortunately, this July, this didn't happen, but the question is still there on the table. Ukraine supported the strengthening of the jurisdiction of the ICC over the crime of aggression. For us, this is a moral and political imperative. This is the issue of stability of our position in international legal sphere. So we hope that this all will really strengthen international law. If now we will move not so fast, or there will be some impediments or hurdles, on the way of the real start of operations of the Special Tribunal, I think this will only weaken international law. So I hope that our international partners really understand that.
Okay, we're reaching the end, and what I want to do in conclusion, thank you very much, Anton, for taking part in this. Your participation is so important, given your role in all of this. But I want to go in reverse order, in which people spoke already, to respond to what you've just heard, and to raise any questions that you think need to be made at this point. Obviously, this is an ongoing discussion, but make your comments in conclusion based on what we've just heard and the challenges that lie ahead. Irwin, why don't you go first?
Well, I just take up where Anton left off. I think the moving forward now is a moral, political, and legal imperative. We have gotten this far, but we have to move with all deliberate speed with regard to establishing all the processes to bring this into play.
Okay. Ina, and maybe Ina, because I was going to ask you this question before, you could say a brief word. I know you've written a lot about this, but about also the importance not only of involving non-European states in this process, but also involving women.
Thank you very much. Very good question. I agree with everything that was said during the discussion today. I hope that the tribunal will have the necessary level of support from Council of Europe member states and other states beyond the Council of Europe, and that all the logistics and financial issues will be smoothly taken care of, because this tribunal is too important to have issues with funding or delay of recruitment procedures or other issues. So we're very much looking forward to it. And as always, we would like to be part of this process. We would like to support the international community, the government of Ukraine, as a civil society and professional community in making these things happen. And Carl, since you mentioned women, it is true that there's a lot of study, and it's not a secret. It's pretty much common knowledge that participation of women in conflict resolution and peace negotiations, in particular, increase the durability of peace when it is achieved. And participation of women in any capacity, official or unofficial, as advisors or in advisory capacity, is of paramount importance for social cohesion, for reconciliation in the society, and for durable peace. So we hope that women will be actively represented in the tribunal, and also will become a part of this process, but not only in the establishment of the tribunal, but in the wider ambience of conflict resolution in Ukraine. And
very good.
Look forward to more developments. And Ambassador Korynevych, if you need me to represent the government of Ukraine, I am ready.
You and many other Ukrainians.
Here we go.
Sort of the front lines of the legal war. Very good. Ambassador Corell, you bring such broad historical and institutional experience to this issue. Give us your thoughts about where we're headed and what you think of what you've heard today.
Well, first of all, I'd like to say that I agree very much with what has been said today, and in particular the long interventions by Irwin Cotler and Anton, and also empowerment of women. I never miss an opportunity to stress how important this is for many reasons, not least for international peace and security. And I think that what is now happening, it's very important that you those who be, shall we say, appointed to work further under the agreement between Ukraine and the Council of Europe are people who can hit the ground running. And there are people with experience of serving on international criminal courts and so forth. It's important to find these people and to ask them if they can assist, because it's so important that things happen quickly as possible. And also, I must say that when I looked at the world today and I look at the United Nations, I think the UN is in need for reform. But the most important thing is that the most powerful organ of the United Nations actually bow to the law that they are supervising, namely the Security Council. The members of the Security Council simply must lead by example. If they don't, then we risk coming into a situation that we are discussing now. And there are so many things that we need to focus on in the future. I'm thinking of environment and also these matters and international criminal, transnational criminal responsibility and so forth. And when I was a student, I sailed the seas. So I've been a seaman for a whole year in 4 summers. So I experienced the sea, and I was responsible for the sea, law of the sea in the United Nations. And here we have another element which is extremely important, that you respect the law of the sea convention. And this is why I think it's so important that in every state, people look at the responsibilities they have and the duty they have to bow to the law, in particular the UN Charter. So my hope is that this experience will really be extremely important for the future, and that will be demonstrating something that needs to be followed, respect for the law, and also the need to reform the Rome Statute. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And your point about members of the Security Council leading by example, I think you got a much better chance of that happening with the main aggressor state if Ukraine continues to show courage and resilience on the battlefield, which it's doing. It's so extraordinary, and Ukraine is so important in a way for the future of the world. I remember once at a meeting right after the beginning of the war in 2014, at a meeting in Ukraine, that the former Prime Minister of Sweden, Carl Bildt, said that Ukraine is the epicenter of the global struggle for democracy. And I actually believe that. And in a way, it's also the epicenter of the global struggle for international law, given the situation that we're in today. David,
Well,
I cannot.
certainly. I mean, if as a European, I'm very, very much concerned about the situation, and I greatly respect the people of Ukraine who are building up a resistance here. And of course, I served as a legal advisor of the foreign minister when Carl Bildt was Minister Minister of State. Prime Minister, and I had experience from the discussions with him when we saw the development in the Europe in those days. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And, I just think, the world has to thank Ukraine. It's offering a new opportunity for the world, not only to sort of counter the impunity for aggression, but also to establish a kind of a new international order. David, I don't have my nomination, my recommendation is not important. I congratulate you on Irwin's nomination. His nomination or recommendation for you to become the chief prosecutor is very important. You have my best wishes, and let's have your final word.
Well, look, I really want to just, having been around and done this with my colleagues for almost 3 decades, I really wanted to say 3 points very, very quickly. And this has been a fascinating and important webinar, and my compliments to Nadia and you, Carl, for your excellent moderation. It's important that the Special Tribunal is just a star in a galaxy of organizations that are trying to seek justice for the people of Ukraine. So I think it's very important that that when we do set up this Special Tribunal, that it is a humble organization that seeks to work with all of these other stars in this galaxy. Another thing is that we have an important constituent, and I really believe this sincerely, is that the ultimate constituent is the people of Ukraine, the victims of Ukraine. This Special Tribunal is for and about the people of Ukraine. And if we lose sight of that, then we're going down the wrong road. So that's very important. And I'll just finish up is, why do we do this? I was in McKinney in Sierra Leone at a town hall meeting, and I was talking to my client, the people, the victims of that terrible civil war. And a young woman stood up. She had been horribly disfigured by the rebels, and she looked at me. I was standing among them, and she looked at me through her one good eye and through cracked lips said, "The rebels did this to me. Seek justice for us." And so, with that, I will conclude my comments.
Thank you very much, David, and I deeply appreciate your passion for the cause of justice, and that's the case with everyone on this panel. This was a wonderful discussion. I want to thank Nadia and the U.S. Ukraine Foundation and the Friends of Ukraine Network for bringing together this meeting. I hope it'll be the first of other discussions so that we can follow this process of the Special Tribunal as it moves forward. Thank you all very much.
Okay, Carl, I'd like to make a couple of closing comments. Irwin, you were so eloquent in talking about the bravery of the people of Ukraine. And yes, but the people of Ukraine have been brave throughout the centuries in so many different ways. And I want especially our colleagues from Ukraine to understand the importance of the work that you all have been doing. I mean, I met David a few years ago, spoke at one of our conferences, and you're the one that raised sort of the alarm about getting this done and getting this done now. And, as a veteran of the political minefield of Washington for almost 50 years, I have to say that such a big difference is made because of the leadership of you and Irwin and Ambassador Corell and the others who have been working on this issue to bring justice. And so I really want to thank you so much for the leadership that you've been providing and for educating us. And, David, you mentioned about this woman saying seeking justice. Part of my motivation is that we know that the Russians, the children that they've taken, one of the things they try to tell them is that they're not wanted, their families didn't want them. But I want them to know, even if we're not able to rescue them, I want them to know that somebody cared and didn't forget them and was trying to bring the perpetrators of these various crimes to justice, that they were not forgotten. And so again, thank you so much for your, again, all the work you all have been doing. And Carl, again, thank you for taking on this new task force along with Irwin. So again, I look forward to many, many more discussions and reports of progress.
Thank you all. It's been a great panel. Thank you.
Thank you.